SpaceX, the private spaceflight company founded by Elon Musk, has been making headlines for its ambitious projects. One of their most daring ventures is the Polaris Dawn mission. This mission represents a new era of private space exploration. It pushes the boundaries of what was once considered the exclusive domain of nations. The Polaris Dawn mission is planned as a multi-day mission that will orbit Earth. It is expected to reach an altitude higher than any previous crewed SpaceX flight. This ambitious mission is privately funded and crewed. It is commanded by Jared Isaacman, a billionaire entrepreneur with a passion for space. One of the most exciting aspects of the Polaris Dawn mission is the planned spacewalk. This will be the first ever private spacewalk conducted entirely by non-professional astronauts. The crew will be using newly developed SpaceX spacesuits. The Polaris Dawn mission is a testament to the growing capabilities of private companies in space. It raises critical questions about the applicability of existing international space law to these new actors. In the midst of the Cold War, with the United States and the Soviet Union locked in a race to space, a remarkable act of diplomacy took place. In 1967, the Outer Space Treaty, OST, was signed. It established a framework for the peaceful exploration and use of outer space. The OST is a landmark international agreement. It forms the foundation of international space law. The treaty articulates several key principles. Among these are the freedom of exploration and use of outer space by all states. It also establishes the principle of non-appropriation of celestial bodies. No nation can claim ownership of the moon or other celestial bodies. The OST also prohibits the placement of weapons of mass destruction in orbit or on celestial bodies. This provision was crucial during the Cold War. It helped to prevent an arms race in space. The treaty promotes international cooperation in space exploration. It encourages states to share information and scientific data. The Outer Space Treaty was a remarkable achievement for its time. It remains a cornerstone of international law. However, the rise of private space actors like SpaceX in recent decades has raised questions about the treaty's continued relevance and applicability in the 21st century. Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty is at the heart of the debate regarding private space activities. This article is crucial because it lays the foundation for how space activities are governed, especially as more private companies enter the space industry. This article establishes the principle of state responsibility for national space activities. Essentially, it means that states are not only responsible for their governmental space missions, but also for the activities conducted by their private sector. This means that states are responsible for the activities of their citizens and entities in space, even if those activities are carried out by private companies. This responsibility extends to ensuring that these private entities adhere to international space law and the provisions of the Outer Space Treaty. Article 6 states that the activities of non-governmental entities in outer space shall require authorization and continuing supervision by the appropriate state party to the treaty. This means that before a private company can launch a satellite or send a mission to space, it must first receive approval from its government. This language implies a level of oversight and control by states over private space activities. Governments must continuously monitor these activities to ensure compliance with international standards and to prevent any actions that could jeopardize the safety and sustainability of outer space. It suggests that states are accountable for ensuring that their private companies comply with the provisions of the treaty. This accountability is crucial in maintaining order and preventing harmful practices in space. The responsibility outlined in Article 6 is significant. It places a considerable burden on states to regulate and supervise their private space actors effectively. It means that states can be held liable for damages caused by their private space actors. This liability extends to any harm caused by space debris, collisions, or other incidents resulting from private space missions. For example, if a private company launches a mission that results in the creation of harmful space debris, the state that authorized and supervised that mission could be held responsible for the damage caused by that debris. This could include financial compensation and other reparations. This principle of state responsibility was designed to prevent a free-for-all in space. It ensures that all spacefaring nations and their private entities operate under a common set of rules and standards. It aimed to ensure that all space activities were conducted in a safe and responsible manner. By holding states accountable, the treaty seeks to promote the peaceful use of outer space and prevent conflicts or accidents that could arise from unregulated activities. However, the rapid rise of private space companies has raised questions about how effectively states can regulate and supervise these new actors, and whether existing regulatory frameworks are sufficient to meet the challenges of this new era of space exploration. As private companies continue to push the boundaries of space travel and technology, the need for robust oversight and updated regulations becomes increasingly critical to ensure the long-term sustainability and safety of outer space activities. Section 4. The American Way: Fostering Private Spaceflight with a Light Regulatory Touch. The United States has been a strong proponent of private spaceflight, recognizing the potential for innovation and economic growth that the private sector can bring to space exploration. It has adopted a regulatory approach that encourages innovation and competition in the private sector, allowing companies to push the boundaries of what is possible in space technology. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, is the primary regulatory body for commercial space launches in the United States. Its role is crucial in maintaining a balance between safety and innovation. However, the FAA's role is primarily focused on ensuring public safety during launch and re-entry rather than on regulating the activities of private companies once they are in space. This approach allows companies more freedom to experiment and innovate. The US government has generally taken a hands-off approach to regulating private space activities once a spacecraft is in orbit. This policy is designed to foster a thriving space industry by reducing bureaucratic hurdles. This stance has been criticized by some who argue that it creates a permissive environment for private companies to operate with minimal oversight. Critics worry that without stringent regulations, companies might prioritize profit over safety and ethical considerations. They worry that this could lead to irresponsible behavior and potential violations of international law, such as the creation of space debris or the monopolization of valuable orbital slots. Others argue that the US approach fosters innovation. They believe that a light regulatory touch allows companies to be more agile and responsive to new opportunities and challenges. They believe that excessive regulation would stifle the growth of the private space industry, making it difficult for new entrants to compete and for existing companies to innovate. They point to the successes of private companies like SpaceX in driving down costs and accelerating the pace of space exploration. SpaceX's achievements in reusable rocket technology and cost-effective space travel are often cited as examples of what can be accomplished with minimal regulatory interference. The US approach to regulating private space activities stands in contrast to the more stringent regulatory regimes in other countries. Nations like Russia and members of the European Space Agency have more comprehensive regulatory frameworks that govern private space activities. This difference highlights the challenges in achieving international consensus on the regulation of private space activities. As more countries and private entities enter the space arena, the need for a unified approach to space regulation becomes increasingly important. Despite these challenges, the collaborative efforts between international space agencies and private companies continue to push the boundaries of what humanity can achieve in space. The future of space exploration will likely depend on finding a balance between fostering innovation and ensuring responsible behavior in the final frontier. Section 5. A Treaty on Trial. Does Polaris Dawn cross the line? The Polaris Dawn mission, with its ambitious goals and private spacewalk, has reignited the debate about the adequacy of the Outer Space Treaty in governing private space activities. This mission, spearheaded by SpaceX, aims to push the boundaries of what private space exploration can achieve, including the first-ever commercial spacewalk. Some legal experts argue that the mission could potentially violate the treaty, while others contend that it falls within the bounds of permissible activity. The core of the debate centers around the interpretation of the treaty's provisions, which were drafted in an era when space exploration was solely the domain of nation-states. Those who believe that Polaris Dawn could violate the OST point to Article 6 and the principle of state responsibility. Article 6 stipulates that states are responsible for national space activities, whether conducted by governmental or non-governmental entities. They argue that the United States, by authorizing and supervising the mission, is ultimately responsible for ensuring that the mission complies with the treaty's provisions. This includes ensuring that private companies like SpaceX adhere to international norms and standards. Given the unprecedented nature of the mission, particularly the private spacewalk, these experts suggest that it is unclear whether the United States is fulfilling its obligations under the treaty. The private spacewalk, a significant milestone, raises questions about liability and accountability in the event of an incident. Conversely, others argue that the Polaris Dawn mission does not violate the OST. They assert that the treaty's language is broad and flexible enough to accommodate the evolving landscape of space exploration. They point out that the treaty does not explicitly prohibit private spacewalks or other activities planned for the mission. The absence of specific prohibitions is seen as an allowance for innovation and the natural progression of space activities. They argue that the treaty's framers could not have foreseen the rise of private spaceflight and that the treaty should be interpreted in a way that allows for innovation and progress in space exploration. The rapid advancements in technology and the increasing involvement of private entities necessitate a modern interpretation of the treaty. The debate surrounding Polaris Dawn highlights the need for greater clarity and specificity in international space law regarding the activities of private actors. As private companies take on more ambitious projects, the legal framework must evolve to address new challenges and opportunities. As private companies continue to push the boundaries of space exploration, the question of how to regulate these activities will only become more pressing. The future of space law will need to balance the interests of innovation, safety, and international cooperation to ensure that space remains a domain of peaceful and beneficial exploration for all humankind.